There we go. All right, Ole, do you want to lead today?
Can do. Let's see. I started some notes. Do you see anything?
Yeah, we see your screen.
Oh. Okay. Strange thing. When starting sharing, they Zoom removed all of you. Anyway, I started a Google Doc just to keep track of meeting notes. We'll probably move this to GitHub as we move along, like we do in other meetings, right, Steve?
Yep.
But right now, this is where we are. I wanted to quickly go through, since you're here, the necessary disclaimers and formal procedures and rituals for ECMA, so everyone is aware of what we're doing. Steve?
Yeah, we'll have to. Is this? Sorry, my daughter was asking me a question. The
Okay.
Yeah, no worries. This is kind of the try to figure out the delineation between the community group and the TG1, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Was that kind of the statement? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when we start doing work and committing stuff to an actual specification, there has to be some things in order for ECMA to approve it. We need to be able to trace who did what, and
Yes.
that we don't claim any patents on the work and that kind of stuff, right?
One thing that I think we discussed previously in an unrecorded setting was actually having the opportunity to greenfield this, right? You know, it's an existing spec that we're kind of building upon, but you know, ServiceNow and OWASP are both OWASP members, and we've jointly kind of contributed to this, so we already have the royalty-free stuff in place. But yeah, I mean, the API is expanding quite a bit, and I think, in my opinion, it would be good to kind of follow the ECMA rules for all of these. And we will kind of need to, I guess, get with Samina and kind of turn this group into the official TG1, I guess, working group for this, right? Is that kind of what your line of thinking is as well? Okay.
Yep. Just as long as everyone is aware, I'm fine.
I posted the link to the TG1 on ECMA International's website. So that was just published a few days ago.
Oh,
so
okay.
this is the text that that we all previously voted to adopt to form TG1. I think we did that, what, 2 weeks ago, something like that. But yeah, this is the text that Samina was able to publish.
Okay, great. I think feels like we're done, unless anyone have questions about this formal stuff.
Yeah, when it becomes official TG1, which is now sort of under the umbrella of ECMA, my company is not anymore a member of ECMA. It was for 25 years, but not now. Does that mean that I would then have to drop out of the meetings, or what?
We can invite you basically as a what does it call it, an expert?
Invited expert, I believe, is the term. My company, the two-person company, is not a member of ECMA either, but You just have to fill in a form. Samina will handle that, so that shouldn't be any problem.
Thanks.
So as long as we have energy, we should be able to participate. Okay. We had an ad hoc meeting because I felt we had some issues to discuss, especially those that Salve and Piotr raised, because they're kind of upstream in the tool chain. And we had a lot of interesting discussions, and we tried to figure out some priorities here. And we said that, well, the main issue for the API is how do you find a component's SBOM, but that applies both to the user finding the primary vendor, but also vendor looking upstream. And their position was more upstream than most of us. And we agree that we will start. This is an interesting problem to find upstream components and everything, but we have to start somewhere and get something done. So we kind of agreed to start with the kind of primary source of bill of materials and other artifacts. And we discussed again some packaging issues and had an interesting discussion with Anthony Harrison after the meeting as well. He was part of it. And the interesting thing is that, like Apache Log4j, they want to publish an SBOM, which kind of is a reference SBOM. How do you use Log4j in a specific version with as few vulnerabilities as possible? And that's kind of interesting in the concept, but I don't think it really affects the API, but it affects the whole world of SBOMs, like dependency track. How do I handle kind of a reference SBOM and get notification that, well, Piotr's changed something and I probably need to change my dependencies as well? That I think that's very, very interesting. But our conclusion in that meeting, I think, was first for an artifact consumer to discover and download artifacts on an acquired product library and validate signatures. We have use cases for that. We also have vendors to publish. This has been part of Project Koala and the API for a long time. But we need to revisit that and see. Then we had the insights. This is kind of passive documents that are signed. They're binary blobs, more or less, that we need to download and get or upload. Insights means that you get an API where you can query the content of those documents. And that's kind of very much more complex, hard to distribute over content delivery networks and other things. And priority 4 was the upstream artifacts. And then we discussed provenance, trying to follow provenance up to the, I would say, the source code of a product, right? Like in the curl example, you have curl from GitHub that is kind of the original, but you may start with Red Hat curl or Debian curl or maybe a derivative of Debian, but you want to trace it all the way up to get to the original. I don't remember who said that should come from the SBOM, really, the pointers to the provenance. But I think these two items, in my world, would be the kind of starting point and focus, is at least my proposal. That stuff I think is reasonable to get done and get into ECMA as a version 1. It requires work, but it's not. I don't see any unforeseen problems right now in it. So my question was really if we could, I can copy and paste this into the other document. If we could agree on the starting points in this working group.
I think these are good starting points. 1 and 2, I think, I mean, the discovery is obviously going to be the most difficult part. I mean, a lot of the other stuff is already done. We just need to kind of review it,
Yep.
modify it. I'm sure it's not perfect. But we already kind of have a base. Discovery is going to be challenging, as we all know. I would love to get number 3, but not. Here's what I would love to do. When we're defining like what that minimal viable API looks like,
Yep.
I would love to dig into number 3, because number 3 is a big bucket of unknown, right? There's all kinds of questions that we could theoretically ask. I think what I'd like to do, or what I would love to see this group do, is identify what specific questions that we want to support in an MVP API. Knowing that we're going to revisit it and add additional capabilities to insights later on, and potentially also provide a extension so that proprietary vendors, commercial vendors, could extend insights themselves while the group is actually still, working on delivering additional insights to market.
I do agree that a MVP is important. I actually think I raised the issue of querying a couple of meetings ago, although last meeting wasn't really an actual formal work group meeting. It was kind of a checkpoint meeting, wasn't it? But basically being able to say, what do you have that I can actually access? I'm looking for a C-bomb. I'm not interested in anything else. I'm looking for a C-bomb. Now, whether that C-bomb is fit for purpose is, I think, would be a question for another day. So the MVP would be simple questions like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, one question could be, hey, do I have any software that's using triple DES? Right? I mean, triple DES is just one other component, right?
Yeah.
But those are different. I think finding a C-bomb, if that's a separate file, that's just an artifact, and bullet point 1 and 2 here in the priority proposal includes that. But querying the content, that's, for me, that's insight, which we put a priority 3.
Yep.
Well, I would have thought that a lot of the insights come after you've actually established that there's an artifact that you can actually retrieve using the API, and then your insights will come once you've actually downloaded the artifact and you're now analyzing it. So
there's a dependency for sure, right? Insight actually requires 1 and 2 to be in place.
Yep.
Yeah.
But insights itself is like this big behemoth of possibilities, which we need to tightly scope on what it is that we're going to do. Otherwise, we're never going to deliver anything.
No, it's going to be a wonderful project as long as I'm getting paid for it, because it's going to be forever. But
yeah.
Okay. I don't hear anything else. Now we're a very small group today, but I suggest that we have come to some sort of agreement on focusing on 1 and 2 first. Then we need to define 1 and 2 better, but okay.
Yeah, works for me.
Thank you. Cool, great. Use cases. Now I need to switch to another document. We have a document called use cases that we filled with just about everything. And I think we should try to remove the use cases into a separate document and publish that on the GitHub repository. Have you gone through the use cases? It's kind of a merger between several documents, I believe. My document on discovery and an existing use cases that we've been working on for a while.
Yeah, it's kind of a dumping ground for everything, as you say.
Yeah, the document right now on Google Docs, yeah, that's a dumping ground for everything.
Yeah.
But I would like to remove the use cases part and move that into a separate markdown document.
Okay. That would be fine. Let's one thing that we could potentially do also is you know, we can obviously put it on in GitHub, right? However, that's only going to really appeal to a certain technical audience. One thing that we might want to consider is, while we're breaking this down into Markdown, right now the TC54 website, basically, if you go to the website and you click on Cyclone or Perl or the API, it actually takes you to the GitHub landing pages. That was a short-term thing. Longer term, we would actually have landing pages on TC54 for each one of those things. So theoretically, we could have like all the information on the API on TC54.
Okay.
And all that is marked down as well. So that will allow us to potentially reach a more of a non-technical audience as well.
Do you think that we could actually start doing some of that for T, even though our work in this work group is coming months after the original sort of CycloneDX work was done? Simply, as you say, I totally 100% agree with the observation that GitHub equals like technical audience, and that there's a real need to surface stuff where the audience would be, for instance, the senior manager who's saying, what the hell are you doing, spending like, you know, all this time working on this? I want to understand what it is at my level. Yeah. So, you know, we could start putting stuff like a use case document, you know, in a markdown format, which can be published sooner rather than later. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and we can do that anytime. So, you know, as soon as we get agreement within this group, I don't need permission from TC54 to do that, right? Because this task groups, I mean, theoretically, we should have the task group in place first. So we should probably wait for that. I mean, well, it's in place, but it's not, we haven't formalized this group yet. But once that is formalized, then yeah, whatever we like cut up from this one document and make use cases and some other documents, we should put those on tc54.org.
Okay.
Now, you would actually envisage having that in GitHub and then automatically published to a website from there?
Well, the tc54.org website is in GitHub, and like a lot of the websites that OWASP has, we use Cloudflare pages. to deploy whatever is in GitHub to a Cloudflare hosted site. So TC54 is no exception.
Right.
Okay. So for the use cases then, we need to add a bit more text on the use cases and maybe some pictures to explain properly. But what I did a while ago is that I added some codes so we can actually refer to them in other places. I kind of find that handy. But I don't think this text here we have, I kind of merged several documents. So here I have an example from my document with a story, like Alice bought a gadget. I think we need both types of texts. This kind of text illustrates the use case.
Yep.
That is more formal.
So that's an example of that particular use case, right? Yeah. I get it. That's fine.
So maybe we can work in the Google Doc a while more until we start moving and trying to get some more text. But while looking to this, feel free to add proposal edits instead of editing directly in the document, so we can discuss the edits. Or if they're simple enough, I'll just go ahead and approve them. But while you're looking into this, try to figure out if we're missing something important here in the use cases. I think we are pretty good coverage in these use cases, but still.
I put a link to the document in the Zoom chat window in case people did not have that link.
Okay.
And in fact, let me make one change to the document, which is up here. Insert link for that.
Okay. So I think we have a plan for use cases. The homework for the whole group is to go through doc and maybe expand text a bit, but also consider if we are missing use cases in there. Okay. Shall we move on from use cases? Okay, the big smorgasbord, which is a Swedish word I like to use in meetings.
That's a good word.
Yeah. So looking at what we have right now, we have discovery, where I have a proposal we need to go through with a transparency exchange identifier, the URN. That will take us through to a website where we have an index. At this point, we haven't got any version identifier. It's just a product, but the index is a list of versions. Possibly we can add life cycle enumeration here to indicate that, well, these versions are no longer supported, or they crashed and burned because of 0-day vulnerability, so please upgrade or something like that. But it can be rather massive, so we need to figure out a really good way not to have a enormous document coming down the pipe when you look for the index. We need to be very clever there. But when you found your version that you're looking for, you're going to step 2, which I think is called T collection, which is the basically index of all the artifacts for that version. And that, in my head, I could be totally wrong, but right now I'm trying to explain how I think. That's a JSON document, right? With content types and possibly some metadata. If we have multiple SBOMs, what type of SBOM, stuff like that. And it should be extensible because here in Europe, we may want to include the certificate of compliance with the Cyber Resilience Act or stuff like that. I would like to see us having the base API documented in OpenAPI. That's a strange format, but you can use a lot of cool tools if it's possible, and if we believe it's doable. I think there will be a lot of benefits because we can generate stub clients, stub servers, and other things, and many people can use this for testing and development. So
I
that's
think this
something
is kind of an important thing because, so like in Cyclone, right, we've got the specification, which is human readable, and then we've got the JSON and XML schemas, which are
Exactly.
the implementations. So I guess what we're proposing here is that we're going to have the human readable specification because that's what ECMA does. And then aside, we will also have the not the implementation. We'll have the open API spec that people
Yep.
then can use to then create implementations from.
That's a kind of normative definition.
Yep. Okay, well, that's great.
Like in the RFCs, when you have the BNF
Mhm.
at the end of the RFC.
Right.
If it's doable, I would love it because that would make it possible to generate a lot of cool stuff when I have a reference. So, I mean, we have two main functions here in the API. Then after we come to collection, then we have a list of stuff. And let's say I want something. Then we need to be able to retrieve that. But we also have the publication side of things. Maybe that's a different kind of open API document, depending on where we're going here. But we need to discuss publication and how we provide not only the document, but also the metadata that goes into collection for it. Then I think we need a separate text on authentication authorization. And there's one side on the retrieval, the other on publication. And it's important to just document that and avoid the pitfalls. For the retrieval, I think we have an agreement that we have an opaque token that could mean thousands of things, but we try to avoid parsing that. We just say that we get a token from somewhere, we use that as an HTTP query token, and we're done. What's in there is implementation specific on the server side. And then we have the insights, right? That could be a whole list of documents, as Steve said.
Well, I think we'll need to discuss other things. I mean, it shouldn't be overly difficult, but things like pagination, right? Because we want all implementations to paginate the exact same way.
You mean like in the index?
Right.
Yeah. That's I tasked evil enough. I tasked Anthony Harrison on this, but I want as many people as possible to find a solution. There must be some other implementation where we have that kind of list. We're looking for something, or we just want to do a selection. Like, I don't know yet. I just know that I have this product, and I put this identifier into my application, and I get a list, and then I can select my version, or I can go check and say, okay, I have this version.
I think
But-
Sorry, I think if OpenAPI spec is like normative, then stuff like pagination and all it will automatically be propagated to everyone. Like
Yeah.
it has to be in the spec essentially.
Yes.
But the question here in the T index is it JSON data? Do we want metadata, or is it just a simple HTTP operation with an HTTP normal? I don't know what they call it, the server side index. I would think that we need a bit more data than we can get from a file list in HTTP.
I'm pretty sure we want like JSON everywhere here because like in theory this can be bot, like this should be to me bot parsable, at least for the use cases I may have. Like, and for this it has to be, I mean, JSON is the easiest format.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think we need, for each version we need some metadata, and in my head, I might be wrong, but having lifecycle enumeration to actually show that, well, you have a old version we no longer support, we have the artifacts, but you shouldn't. That comes on that level for me, not in the collection level.
So maybe we move like schema, like to me, the OpenAPI schema should be on every level here. Like every time you make any request, it should be in the schema. So it's like, I don't know, the open. So the OpenAPI I think is like I mean, if we go with OpenAPI, ideally I would love to have GraphQL at some point, but maybe later.
But GraphQL doesn't that? Yeah, that could come here as well. Interesting. Okay.
No, I think it's easier for the community to like OpenAPI is more more readily understandable, probably.
There's many more that can implement that. Yeah. I've been playing around with GUAC and trying to understand GraphQL, but I haven't gotten there. But yeah.
No worries. One question I actually have here is like, from what I mean, I don't want to get back to the other thing, but like my understanding is it may be difficult to get the TEI from like from the product or from some software that we have. So what I heard, like what was discussed also in the previous meeting, is like a lot of organizations actually resort to some sort of search, or like maybe fuzzy search. Like, do you want to include it somehow at this point just to make the tool more usable, or leave it to implementation, or just like forget about it for now?
I think that we much like Perl, it has to be an extensible identifier, right? So we can include existing identifiers in this. So we don't have to do fuzzy search, but we can come back to that.
Okay.
So I kind of, in some cases, I overstructure things, but I think this is kind of a structure we can work on and possibly start a few separate documents on to work with. Or am I completely wrong and way out in the woods?
I've been thinking about some of the stuff there. You know, when you have got, for instance, under T index, JSON data, so that I think can easily be agreed, and there's no impediments to actually getting that done. Ditto for pagination. Then you've got lifecycle enumeration. Now, lifecycle enumeration is something which is actually being handled by a separate work group, not so, Steve?
Yeah.
So does that mean that actually the MVP for T would be held up by that. And secondly, my envisaging of life cycle enumeration, if for instance you're looking at, say, a reference implementation like a dependency track, is something like dependency track, in other words, a consuming system, would support the life cycle enumeration. So my first thing is I'm using like log4j 1 point whatever. I know I'm using it, so I need to actually use T to actually find out some information about it. But I already know that it's actually out of support, but that doesn't stop me needing to know information about it because I'm actually using it. But then I would use the existing lifecycle stuff that I've got to then make appropriate queries for further information to help guide me, for instance. Do I need to go to an LTS? Is there an intermediate release which would sort me? So you might be making only like 2 or 3 additional queries, but you already know what queries you're going to be making based on the fact that you've already got support for the lifecycle enumeration. Or is it actually really important that the lifecycle enumeration is actually part and parcel of the T specification? Thoughts?
Mark, I tried to answer by writing as you spoke. That was an example, I think, that I used. That I think the requirement is to have extensibility here, right?
Yes.
We shouldn't be waiting for that. I think that would hurt this project. But while discussing whether or not this is JSON, I use that as an example, saying we need metadata. Could be other metadata that we figure out as we work along. But see this as an example from my side and not a requirement. We definitely should not have a blocking thing like that. We're already in a hurry in my world. Okay?
Sure. So if we focus then on sort of what would we want to have in the MVP? I mean, Steve, you already said, use the example about it. This, should be extensible. So, implementers should be able to stick in support for extra functionality.
That was for the insights for sure, because, we're not going to be able to account for, every possible scenario. We can come up with maybe some MVP scenarios, and maybe in V2 of the API, we can expand that out. But we really want insights to be, provide some core functionality with the ability for open source and proprietary vendors to actually extend that out in ways that, highlight the benefits of their own platform, right? Because again, we can't account for any scenario, all scenarios. Now, if you look at the use cases document, I actually have CLE as kind of this major thing, but it's really just another supply chain artifact. And we've already got the discovery and publishing and retrieval of those artifacts, right? That's already going to be part of the spec. The CLE should realistically not be treated any different. Now, we will have to provide some kind of enumeration of the possible different types of artifacts, because we don't want this to be a dumping ground for all different kinds of things, right? We need it structured in a way where you can query on, hey, I want the SBOM for this. I want the CBOM for this. I want the VEX or VDR or CLE for this. So we will have to create a fairly tightly scoped enumeration of the types of things that we want to support, because we can't support everything, right? This is not Google Drive. But I don't think that's going to hold us up, right? These specs can evolve independently from one another. And in fact, there's actually going to be 2 specs for life cycles, right? You got the OASIS group working on a very simple spec, in my opinion, right? And then you've got CLE, which is working on a more comprehensive specification that's not only going to include, like end of life and the support, but is also, which we might want to think about how we more tightly integrate this will also take in consideration other types of life cycle events. For example, has the package been renamed? Is there a new manufacturer, a new supplier? Has some supplier been acquired by another supplier? Right? These types of supply chain events we're trying to capture in that specification as well, which is why it's more of a time series type spec than what the OASIS folks are kind of working on. So we'll have to figure out like how we can
also
leverage
discussed,
some of the
we discussed open source forks, so we can actually follow forks, and it's massive.
But yeah, out of the box,
Okay.
I don't think the CLE work is actually going to hold this project up. And in fact, even though the CLE is just now getting off the ground, we will probably finish before this group does, because there is a lot to tackle here.
Okay. I think we have some sort of roadmap here then. And what we can do is actually move stuff over to the GitHub repository and make template documents for all of this with some base information on the scope of each bullet point. And then we can roll up our sleeves and start working and see if we can get energy in the group to start defining the JSON data, to look at the Open API and other things.
Does that mean that in future you're envisaging that when we're actually working on a document, the document itself is in GitHub and therefore not in Google, like one we're looking at here?
I think, and now I'm not on solid ground. Steve have to help me. But in order, when we start creating stuff that actually is material, not just meeting notes and brainstorms, we want traceability for ECMA. We need to get Samina into the next meeting to help us define everything. But working on GitHub, then we actually have traceability to who did what in a very nice way, because we're going to start creating a lot of new stuff that we know now that is going into ECMA. So it would be nice to have that traceability, but also being able to publish stuff from Markdown and Open API. Open API, you can publish very nice web pages automatically, and PDFs and other things. So it's a nice environment to start with, having a Git repository.
Absolutely. And you were talking about sort of suggesting changes and then having them merged in. Well, that could be just captured by your standard PR with an approval.
Absolutely.
And then it's recorded for ECMA's benefit. As you say, total audit trail.
Yeah, total audit trail, peer review, approval, get it in, get it done. But also having some markdown linters, conversion to PDFs, conversion to HTML pages in the background. I think that's would be nice as well.
Yeah. The markdown I think will be fine. We do have to use a very specific ECMA template, Microsoft Word template. So we're actually doing that with Cyclone, for example. So we've got this convoluted process that basically parses the CycloneDX JSON schema, which is our source of truth for the specification. We've got a bunch of logic in place to kind of do things in certain ways. And then the end result is Markdown that then gets sent through Pandoc using the ECMA Microsoft Word template to then generate that thing that ECMA needs. This is important because the ECMA Word template is basically a derivative of the ISO Word template. So because that's our standardization path, we're going through ECMA and then ISO. it's really, really important for us to kind of get the formatting of these documents correct. If we start with Markdown, that's fine. However, the final deliverable is going to be a Microsoft Word document, which
Yep.
ECMA themselves will then convert to PDF.
Yep. Cool. Okay, then. I don't think we have anything more. I think we have pretty much agreements. We just need to start working. Does anyone have any other topic you want to bring up today?
I'm good.
There is one other project. Now, I just described the way we do it for CycloneDX. However, and because again, we don't want to basically rewrite everything that's in the JSON schema in, plain English, right? That would be ridiculous. So we don't do it. So we have this whole convoluted process. However, there is a really interesting project that we might want to consider looking at. If I can find my, if I can find the link here. Let's see. Oh yeah. This project right here, I will put it in the Zoom chat. Metanorma. It is basically a way to, I think it used ASCII2Doc, I think.
Yeah.
But you start with that and it automatically generates the file formats for all of the different standards bodies, ISO being one of them. And because ECMA uses basically the same ISO template with a few changes, it might be interesting to consider investigating that. I haven't personally looked at it, but we might want to kind of on the side, take a look at that and see if it will be any use to us or not.
Oh. So IETF, that would be your RFCs and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, they
Sweet.
got NIST templates, IETF, ISO, etc. So, yeah, it's interesting.
And BSI, is that the German one?
Yes.
Cool.
Okay. Anything else?
I'm good.
Not for me. Nope.
Okay. Great. Then we have a few minutes break before the next TC54 meeting.
Yay.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. I think we made a lot of progress. We have a plan, and we just need to get some stuff up on GitHub, but Steve and I will coordinate that and make sure we move things around on that repository so the new stuff gets its own place there. Thank you, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Bye.